Brace yours'll this. A shocking act of defiance on the tennis court has turned a dream partnership into a nightmare, as Alex Eala's catastrophic meltdown didn't just cost her the game it committed. The UL didn't sin against her idol Venus Williams in front of millions, leaving a silence so deafening that fans feared the young prodigy's career was over before it even began. The tennis world held its breath as the legendary champion walked away without a single word, igniting a firestorm of betrayal, tears, and vicious online backlash that threatened to destroy their sacred sisterhood forever. But just when the world thought the story was dead, Venus Williams broke her bone-chilling silence with a jaw-dropping revelation that nobody saw coming, exposing a hidden truth that flips this entire tragedy on its head. Get ready for an emotional roller coaster of raw fury, heartbreaking regret, and a forgiveness so powerful it will bring you to tears, because this isn't just tennis. This is the most shocking redemption story in sports history, and you are not ready for what happens next. The air in the stadium was electric, charged with the kind of tension that only a generational clash can produce. On one side of the net stood Venus Williams, a titan of the sport, a seven-time Grand Slam champion whose very presence commands respect. On the other was Alex Eala, the bright-eyed prodigy from the Philippines, a rising star who had looked up to Venus as a hero her entire life. This wasn't just a match, it was a passing of the torch, a dream realized. But dreams, as the world would soon find out, can turn into nightmares in the blink of an eye. The match was a brutal three-set war. Eala, fueled by youthful exuberance and possessing a fearless forehand, pushed the 43-year-old Venus to her absolute limit. She was playing the tennis of her life, serving bombs and painting the lines. The crowd was on their feet, witnessing what they believed was the changing of the guard. Then came the third set. With the score tied at 5-5 and the momentum firmly in her favor, Eala found herself staring down a break point on Venus's serve. This was the moment. This was where legends were made. Venus hit a deep sliding slice that was destined for the corner. Eala scrambled, her recovery in full sprint, and she got to the ball. And that's when it happened. In a moment of pure, adrenaline-fueled instinct, Eala flicked a desperate wrist to try and wrong-foot the charging Venus. The ball was heading wide. The point was lost. But Eala, in her frantic panic, threw her racket. Not a drop. A full, arm-extending throw that sent the racket cartwheeling through the air, crossing the net and landing just inches from the advancing Venus. The stadium fell silent. The umpire's eyes went wide. A umpire's eyes went wide. A racket thrown across the net, an automatic code violation, a point penalty. But this wasn't just a point. This was a match point for Venus. The penalty gave Venus the game, the set, and the match. Eala had thrown away her biggest opportunity, not with a double fault, but with a moment of pure, uncontrolled frustration. The look on her face was one of pure horror. She hadn't meant to throw it at Venus. She had thrown it in frustration at the lost point. But the damage was done. The legend had been disrespected. Venus, who had been in the middle of her run to the ball, stopped dead in her tracks. The crowd gasped, expecting an eruption of anger from the fiery Venus. Instead, she just stared. She stared at the racket lying on her side of the court, and then she stared at the young girl across the net who was now crying. Venus didn't celebrate. She didn't shake the umpire's hand. She simply packed her bag, signed a few autographs, and walked off the court without a single word to Eala. The silence was a verdict. The internet exploded with hashtags condemning Eala's disrespect and poor sportsmanship. The young girl's reputation was in tatters, and the ultimate symbol of class, Venus Williams, had been publicly humiliated. The silence from Venus in the hours that followed spoke 1,000 words, and they were all damning. To understand the magnitude of the destruction, we have to rewind the tape. The relationship between Venus Williams and Alex Eala was one of the most beautiful narratives in modern tennis. It wasn't just a mentor-mentee dynamic, it was a sisterhood forged in fire and sweat. Venus had taken the young Filipina under her wing years ago, long before Eala was a household name. She saw something in her, a fire, a passion, and a grace that reminded her of herself. Venus didn't just offer verbal advice. She opened her world to Eala. She invited her to train in Florida, to use her facilities, and to absorb the Williams way. This wasn't just about tennis. It was about lifestyle. Venus taught her about the importance of discipline, fashion, and handling the mental pressure of the big stage. The tennis world affectionately called them the Venus and the Vine. Social media was flooded with clips of them laughing together, strategizing, and the legendary champion imparting wisdom to the next generation. Venus was grooming Eala not just to be a player, but to be the next ambassador for women's tennis. For Eala, Venus was more than a coach. She was an older sister. She was the guardian of the legacy. Every photo of them together was a promise that the future was safe. When Eala won her junior Grand Slam titles, Venus was one of the first to congratulate her, posting heartwarming messages that brought fans to tears. This wasn't just a rivalry, it was a dynasty in the making. The narrative was perfect. The old guard passing the torch to the new. Then came the tactical shift. In the match prior to the controversial incident, Venus had been using her experience to slice and dice the young player. She played to Eala's weaknesses, exposing the immaturity in her game. Eala, frustrated by the veteran's tricks, became visibly agitated. She slammed her racket on the ground, a warning sign that the pressure was getting to her. Some fans noticed the tension. Others dismissed it. But the seeds of discord were being sown. The costly mistake wasn't just a single throw of the racket, it was the culmination of built-up tension. Eala felt she had to prove herself against her mentor, to show she wasn't just the little sister. She was trying to beat the legend. But in doing so, she lost the person who had been her biggest supporter. The racket throw was a betrayal of everything Venus stood for. It was a public display that Eala didn't have the emotional control to be a champion, a harsh indictment against all the mentoring Venus had invested. The silence from Venus after the match wasn't just anger. It was the silence of a broken heart. As Venus walked off the court, the digital world went into meltdown. The video of the racket throw went viral in seconds, replayed from a dozen angles on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The internet has a short memory, but this was a sin that wouldn't be forgotten. Fans of the Williams family, known for their passion and protectiveness, immediately labeled Eala as disrespectful and immature. They flooded her social media pages with angry emojis and even angrier comments. "You threw a racket at Venus Williams?" One viral tweet read. "You might as well have thrown it at the Queen of England." The sentiment was clear. There are lines you do not cross, and Eala had crossed them. The mainstream media picked up the story, broadcasting it not as a tennis match, but as a generational feud. Headlines screamed, "Eala's tantrum cost her everything, and Venus snubs rising star." The narrative was set in stone. Eala was the villain. Venus was the victim. But not everyone agreed. A section of the fan base, particularly the younger generation, came to Eala's defense. "She's 21, she made a mistake," they argued. They pointed out that Venus herself had thrown her racket multiple times in her career. They claimed the reaction was hypocritical and driven by nostalgia and bias towards the Williams legend. This sparked a full-blown war in the comments sections. Veteran tennis analysts weighed in, most siding with Venus, condemning Eala's actions as a lack of class. Other analysts argued that while the throw was poor form, the code violation was harsh. They believed Eala was winning the rally and would have gone on to win the match. They accused the umpire of being starstruck. Fueling the fire were sources claiming that Venus had demanded an apology and that the Williams camp was deeply disappointed. Another source claimed that Eala was inconsolable and had tried to catch Venus in the locker room, but Venus refused to see her. This painted a picture of a bitter rivalry, a mentor so furious that she would abandon her protege in her darkest hour. It was the perfect storm of controversy, making the silence of Venus one of the most talked-about moments in sports history. Days passed. The rumors grew wilder. Was Eala's career over? Was the mentorship officially dead? Then, just as the news cycle was beginning to cool down, Venus Williams took to social media. She didn't post a carefully crafted statement or a press release. She posted a video. The clip was raw, unpolished, and shot in her living room. Venus looked tired, her eyes weary. It wasn't the gladiator we saw on the court. It was the older sister. The internet held its breath. The video started with a deep sigh. "I have been quiet," Venus began, her voice calm but firm. "I wanted to let the dust settle. I wanted to process. I wanted to process." The fans were shocked. She wasn't angry. She was protective. "Alex is a phenomenal player," Venus continued, "with a future so bright it hurts my eyes to look at it. What happened on that court was a mistake, a big one, but it was a mistake, not a crime." She went on to explain the pain. Not the pain of a loss she had lost before. It was the pain of a broken trust, not between competitors, but between sisters. "When I saw that racket fly, I didn't see a villain," Venus confessed. "I saw a young girl who was so desperate to win, so desperate to prove herself to me, that she lost herself in the moment. I saw the pressure I put on her. I saw a reflection of my own younger self, but without the control I learned to master." This wasn't the fiery defense people expected. Venus was taking responsibility. She felt she had pushed Eala too hard. The silence wasn't about punishment. It was about disappointment in herself for not guiding Eala better through the pressure. "If you love someone, you don't break them when they fall," she stated. "You help them up." Alex called me. We talked. The conversation was long. There were tears. There was laughter. She spoke about the bond and said, "This is tennis. It is brutal, but the relationships you build are stronger than any trophy." The video ended with a stunning revelation. "I love her like a sister. I will always be in her corner. She has my full support." The world was stunned. The silence was broken, not by a scolding, but by an embrace. The video was the spark that ignited a global wave of emotion. The narrative flipped. The story shifted from betrayal to redemption. The real shocker, however, was still to come. A few hours after Venus's video, Alex Eala posted her own response. A simple raw photo of herself with red-rimmed eyes. The caption read, "Thank you, Venus. I let you down, but I will never stop fighting for you. I will learn. I will be better." But the real climax came the next day during a press conference. The two players were scheduled to be at the same tournament. The media waited with bated breath. Would they avoid each other? Would the tension be palpable? Then, the cameras caught the moment that became the headline of the decade. Walking through the hallway of the players' facility, Alex Eala spotted Venus Williams walking down the opposite end. The tennis world froze. Eala looked terrified, her steps faltering. Venus continued walking, her expression unreadable. The paparazzi clicked furiously. Then Venus smiled, a wide, genuine, sisterly smile. She opened her arms wide. Eala, her eyes filling with tears, rushed forward. They embraced in the middle of the hallway, a tight, long hug that lasted several seconds. Venus whispered something in Eala's ear. Later, lip-readers deciphered it. "It's okay. You're my girl." There was no cold shoulder. There was no passive-aggressive distance, just raw, human forgiveness. The whole tennis community breathed a collective sigh of relief. The mentorship was back on, and stronger than ever. In the following press conference, Venus sat next to Eala. Venus, usually the stoic professional, sat with her hand on the younger girl's shoulder. Eala was asked about the incident. Eala choked up, but Venus squeezed her shoulder and nodded, a gesture of immense support. "This is what a sisterhood looks like," Venus interjected. "It's not about the wins or the losses. It's about having each other's backs when the world turns its back on you." The costly mistake turned into a costly lesson. It reminded the world that sports are about more than just competition. They are about humanity, growth, and the unbreakable bonds that transcend the scoreboard. The silence was broken, and the result was louder than any victory or defeat could ever be. If you enjoyed this shocking sports update and want to stay ahead of the biggest stories in the world, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to World Zone right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the action. See you in the next video.